I created a fly rod company out of my garage. This is where I design, assemble, and ship rods worldwide. Definitely the opposite of what you think a fly rod company looks like, but this is where I started out and this is how I wanted to build this company from the beginning. But why would you want to build a fly rod company in your garage in the first place, when I literally can buy a rod from a company that already has a nice design and a rod that I can afford? Well, to answer that question, we're going to build a switch rod and bring it to Nevada so we can fish one of the world famous lakes called Pyramid Lake. Now in Pyramid, everybody fishes these switch rods so that they can shoot the line out there without making a back cast. So this was one of my very first rods that I ever built, and I thought to myself, I could build rods and actually save money and go on all these trips, which in the end helped me get into building rods.
That was so cool. He just rolled right in front of the bobber. Oh, sick. That's cool.
Now there's something really weird about tying your own fly and catching a fish on a fly that you tied, and it's the same thing with building rods. You build the rod, you put every little millimeter of detail into that rod, and you go out and you catch some big fish on it. It's actually very, very rewarding. And there's something about me that a lot of people know if you know me personally. I'm a very business-oriented person, so I'm not the type of person that can just like build a rod and just be satisfied with building rods and fishing my own rods. Of course, I had the idea, I'm going to sell these rods and I'm going to build the biggest, best rod company that you can ever imagine. I'm going to do something so different from everybody else. The only problem is I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how to make good rods. So that was step one. So this is the switch rod that we brought to Pyramid, the very first, one of my very first rods I've ever made. And like for the most part, the rod is actually pretty good. It held up. This is I think this was like an 11-foot 3-inch 7-weight switch rod. I was brand new to building these. A lot of these parts are made overseas. It held up fine. There's just a bunch of the color scheme I don't like. The one thing that I did about this rod that was really interesting is I made the label of this super, super small instead of putting, and I didn't even have a label for the company yet, so I just kind of made one on the computer real quick. And the guides looked at it and they couldn't see it. I mean, it is incredibly small. It's like you have huge label of the rod and then the company is very, very small. I barely even had a name of the company at that point. And then this rod was the very first rod I've ever made. This is my #1 rod I've made. I was just learning, of course, on this one. And I made blue wrap on a green rod, which is kind of an ugly combination. Of course, I just handwrit the name of the company on here. Didn't have a logo or anything like that, so just handwrit some of that on there. A lot of trial and error. This rod actually fishes just fine. Like the guides aren't in alignment when you look down the guides of the rods. They're all, one's going this way, one's going this way. Because when we put epoxy on these, we put these in dryers and they slowly roll overnight. And I had it on the floor and a piece of hair got caught in it and got in one of the guides on there. I wonder if that is still, yeah, there, yeah, there's hair on here. That's pretty ridiculous. And then the tip top is just like twice the size of like a regular tip top. It's like absolutely massive. So it's, the rod works and it's actually kind of a strong rod. I use this as my backup rod. Like when I go to the lakes, I'll just throw it in the back of the truck. And the hook keeper too is like this little plastic hook keeper on there, which I don't even know where I found. That's gonna rip. You don't want those on there. You want metal on there. Kind of an interesting 9-foot 6-weight rod. First rod I ever built. But now our rods look totally unrecognizable from when we first started. For example, these rods are some of the finest fly rods that I have ever built. It's taken me years to define this different design, the guide spacing, finding good blanks, sourcing really good components, American-made guides, everything. This rod compared to that last rod is just a completely different animal. We put our logo on here because I wanted the rods to kind of have a branding to them. So that's on the top of the rod. So if the reel sits on the bottom, you can see the name of the rod company on there. We also have it here on the side. And then just everything that we have is just really plain on here, just Founder Series. Founder Series meaning this is our first high quality product that we have that's a premium brand of fly rods basically. And probably my favorite part about these rods is the cork handles. These are much wider than your traditional cork handles. They're wider because it gives a better grip when you're gripping on them. And a lot of people, when they first grab it, they don't like it. But then after they fish with it for maybe an hour or cast it a couple of times, it actually feels a lot better on your hand. It's not only smoother because the cork is very high quality, but it actually is a lot nicer on your hand because it's wider. So that's one thing that we do that's different. And these green marks that I put on here, the reason I put those on there is just because when you go to a fly shop, every rod pretty much looks the same. I wanted mine to like stick out. So when you see a bunch of cork handles, this is obviously going to be different because it has a green color on it. And I put the green color on there so that you could know that it was custom made and that each one of these pieces was individually glued on here and picked out and sourced. And one of the reasons these are just a little bit different. I also put serial numbers on each one of these just because each one of these rods is different. They're not all the same. These rods may look all kind of the same, which is good for quality control, but each one is kind of made one by one, and I want people to know that. I want people to know that I made each rod. I want people to know that each one of these is individually crafted one by one and not factory made. The time that it takes me to produce these is pretty insane. It takes a long time to produce these rods. These rods, I don't know, took 30, 40, 50 hours, something like that to build because, and I'll get really frustrated building them because they just simply take so much time to build, but that's why they look so nice at the end. Alignment dots on here. It's just a small little thing and then I epoxy over the top of it so that that stays on. So you have the serial numbers. So when you're assembling the rod, it just makes it just that much easier to just line those up. And since I've been doing that, it actually makes a huge difference. When you're packing your rod, constantly breaking it down and putting it back together, especially when you're like traveling, you want to just be able to throw it together really quick. So that's something that I do that's quite different. I used to not do that in the past, but as I learned to build these, I've kind of just made those modifications. Let me give you a little tour. This is basically the garage. This is where everything happens. You can see it is like half garage, half rod factory. So this is what's called a rod wrapper. I have two modes on here. I can use it as a lathe. So when I step on the gas button there, this is actually gonna turn really, really fast. And if I put this little thing and I hook it up to here, I can actually use this as a rod dryer. The only problem with this is that I can only do one rod at a time. And if I do one rod at a time, my production is very, very low. So then I bought this. So now I have three different stations. I basically have this one that I could be working on. I have this one which I can get all the cork handles done. And while I'm doing that, then I can actually be drying these at the same time. And usually I'll let the rods dry and it'll take anywhere from 1 to 2 days for the epoxy, for one coat of epoxy to dry. So a lot of times I'll come in at night, especially in the winter time, and I'll have 4 of these going and 4 rods are gonna be hooked up here, like slowly turning. And then I'll come in here and I'll do the lathe. The only problem is there's so much dust here that I have to make, one thing I have to be careful of is to make sure that I don't get all this dust onto these rods. So I have to do this a little bit different timing. This is one disadvantage of using a garage, is that this is so close to here. Ideally, these would be a little bit separate, but I work around that. So this is basically the table that I use to tie all the guides onto the blanks. And my wife loves that I use this table because this used to be our kitchen table and now it is just full of junk. I also tie all my flies over here too. And the reason I do this inside because in the winter it gets really cold. So I don't want to be outside all the time. So I do the epoxying outside and in here I do all the guide wrapping. And right now I use the drift boat as a storage container basically for a lot of the built rods. After I'm done with the rods here, I will put the final rods here, especially when I'm waiting to do the serial numbers on this bench over here. I'll use the drift boat as kind of like a storage unit. Right now I just have a couple of rods that I'm using because I'm going fishing tomorrow. So I put most of those rods actually up here. And this is actually a really cool view of the different rod handles. I used to make these rod handles. These are pre-made rod handles, but I want you to see the difference between these and these. This is basically a newer cork handle that I did custom, where I take the pieces and I one by one glue them together. You can see it's going to hold up. It not only looks nicer, but it's going to hold up better than this one. And I have 4 sets of rods up here. These are the Founder series. These are the expensive rods, the really, really nice ones that I build now. I used to sell these. These are a little less expensive. These are the Float series. So I just kind of have them sitting up there right now. I might sell those off at some point. I don't really know what I'm going to do with those. Here I have a prototype. These are trout rods that I made that are specifically made for trout fishing. So I'm going to prototype those, send them to some guides and maybe try those out later. And then down here I've got all the other conglomerate of rods. I've got switch rods and spey rods and prototypes and new rods in there. So right now that's how I store these. And then I use this when I epoxy rods because I'm so worried that I'm gonna like inhale epoxy when I'm doing these. And this really helps kind of keep that out. It's like got little aerators on the side. I like to wear this when I'm doing any of the lathe work or I'm doing anything with the epoxy. I just have this paranoia I'm gonna get it in my eye, so I wear that. This is actually a 9-weight that I'm working on. It's a saltwater rod because this is saltwater worthy, which is really important. And then these guides are specially coated to withstand the salt water. So I have the final wrap on here. I just need to epoxy it, serial number it. I just finished this morning, so that turned out really nice. So I'm ready for this to be, so this is pretty much 60% of the way built. It'll be done in about 2 days. And there you go, just a little bit about my garage, about me, about the rods. Hopefully you learned a lot. DM me or write in the comments if you have any questions about this, and thanks for watching.